All right, hey everyone. It's Miles from Narcovery, and today what I just want to do is jump just kind of face first into toxic relationships, and this is a place where sense and sensibility make no sense at all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through all the different kinds of mental things, the chemistry that kind of gets involved with when we get involved with toxic partners. And here's the thing: it's like we can feel addicted to narcissistic toxic partners, and there's so much drama in these relationships, and that's what ends up happening. That's what ends up kind of hooking us in. Maybe we can say that we're attracted to these people who, at first they seem like so mysterious and so exciting, and and we end up finding all the different things about in our lives that they end up wreaking havoc on our bodies, on our minds, on our brains. And I get it. There's an allure to these toxic partnerships, and including narcissists and emotionally unavailable people. Excuse me. And it's more than an emotional or a psychological attraction. It becomes deeply biochemical, and it's because our brains can be rewired to fixate on people who are not good for us. And it's like narcissistic partners exploit this in order to hook us in, especially if we're somebody who's empathetic. For empaths, it's like narcissists hook us much like a drug hooks an addict. And it's the biochemistry in our brains that draws us to these dark places and these dark people, because understanding these subconscious bonds is the first step towards breaking them and breaking free. And breaking free means understanding the sticky, toxic web of narcissistic relationships and their effects on our brain chemistry. Imagine that your brain chemistry is like almost like a lab experiment where the toxic narcissistic partner, they are like volatile chemicals, almost like a spore of toxic mold that gets put into a petri dish and then grows and grows. It's not just your heart on the line, it's the very new neurons that in your brain that takes the big hit. And what we learn is that narcissistic relationships are less about romance and more about just biochemical warfare, because your brain, bless its little squishy little wiring and the circuits that are in there, it gets tricked into addiction. The love bombing is like a hypnotic drug. The narcissists and their emotionally unavailable band of flying monkeys are like mad scientists, and they're expertly manipulating these chemical reactions just to keep us coming back for more. And yeah, it can feel like we can't stop ourselves sometimes. And if we know, that even though that we know that they're bad for us, and I'll explain why that is. Let's talk about this addiction to toxic narcissistic partners, or just this addiction to bad boys and bad girls. It's almost like a syndrome. Let's talk about the allure of the narcissist. These bad people. And it's not just the rebel without a cause vibe that we get attracted to. It's a full blown biochemical puppet show. And the narcissist is the one that's pulling all the strings. And this isn't just, a love story that's gone wrong. It's a neurochemical, narcissistic con job. And the narcissist will rewire our brains to crave the chaos that brings so much of it. Like there's a way that addicts kind of crave their next fix. These toxic people with their narcissistic traits and emotional coldness are like the nicotine of our souls. Yeah, they're bad for you, absolutely, but it makes it really absurdly hard to quit. And this addiction to a narcissist is an addiction to the highs and the lows and this emotional roller coaster that we get put on. And these highs are dizzying, the lows are just soul crushing. It's a thrill ride of emotions, and the price for admission is your emotional well-being, your mental health. And what's required is complete surrender to a narcissist, and that's not a good deal. And breaking up with a narcissist is like detoxing from a painful drug. Narcissists are masters of the art of push and pull. And inside, the relationship, you can feel like a human yo-yo. Narcissists are inconsistent, they're unfair, and they have a knack for poking at your deepest insecurities and, instinctively know how to do the most damage in the shortest amount of time. Because narcissists use this toxic mix of sweet talking and fast forward fantasies. And this is also known as future faking. And this kind of keeps us locked in. And what do you know? Do you want to know what future faking actually is? This is where a narcissist convince you to stay with statements like, not these words, but the intent is like, yeah, this moment kind of sucks right now, but stick with me and we'll be living like royalty, like you'll see. It's like spoilers. That never happens. It's like being offered a sample of an addictive love potion that's coated in chocolate only to find out that it's laced with emotional cyanide. And those who find themselves drawn to narcissistic people, the bad treatment actually deepens our addiction, spinning our brains into a cycle that's really hard to escape. And it's like a fly that's kind of caught in a spider's web. That's what it can feel like to be in these narcissistic relationships. So let's unravel these toxic ties from a narcissist that form when we're in these relationships, because recognizing narcissistic signs and traits is so important towards breaking free from the gravitational pull of these emotional black holes of people. All right, let's decode the world of trauma bonds with a narcissist. So what you can do is you can think of it as the equivalent of being sucked into quicksand, because the more you struggle, the more it feels like you sink. So let's understand the formation of trauma bonds. And this becomes just the narcissist's emotional bait and switch. Imagine, meeting somebody who initially showers you with all this attention. It's almost like a tropical storm. It's just like love is just falling all over you. And, in the middle of it, it's like standing in the spotlight, feeling like a star of your own movie. But there's a catch, and it's a big catch. Just as you get comfortable in the glow, the narcissist will pull back, leaving you in the emotional dark. And this narcissistic hot and cold routine isn't just confusing, it's a biochemical warfare on your psyche. And this combination of intense affection followed by cold withdrawal, creates a trauma bond, much like, how a fish gets hooked, first by the bait and then by the line. And this bond that the narcissists create is tough, and it's built through just a relentless cycle of affection and rejection. And understanding this isn't true love, but a biochemical glitch that helps us, start to cut that emotional cord that ties us to these toxic people. And to start to break free from these trauma bonds, we just have to start by understanding the biochemical bond that narcissists create. So let's look at the science behind the pain. We're going to get a little bit nerdy here, but our brains, they're almost like amateur chemists, and they're mixing dopamine and stress hormones to create this cocktail that keeps us coming back to what hurts us. When a narcissist mixes affection and rejection, it's like pressing a bruise over and over, and it hurts in a way that's hard to ignore. The pain is not just metaphorical, it's physical, firing the exact same areas of your brain as physical pain. And each cycle of push and pull, a narcissist, puts us deepens this trauma bond, making it even more challenging to break free. And we can break this nice narcissistic trauma bond cycle and move towards awareness and into action. And breaking up with a narcissistic partner can feel like you're going through withdrawal, and this is because in a very real way you are. Just like, stepping away from a drug, distancing yourself from a trauma bond can trigger withdrawal symptoms, and it's messy and it's painful. And it's why having a support system is crucial. So friends, family, therapists are really important, because what are they? They end up being your emotional support crew, ready to help you navigate through just stormy emotional crapper involves in breaking free. And as we move forward, building self awareness about narcissism and the trauma bond, and even cognitive dissonance, is an important part of the defense system. So, recognize the narcissistic red flags earlier is so important. The best time to start the healing process is yesterday. The second best time is today, and the third best time is tomorrow. So start your recovery process now if you haven't already. And one thing to kind of do first is to establish boundaries. And it's like this fortress wall. It's so important to lean on people who treat you with consistent respect, thinking of it as, choosing a steady, healthy diet over fast food. It's less thrilling in the moment, but it's still much better for you in the long run. Therapy to recover from narcissistic abuse isn't just a tool, it's an ally and rebuilding your self-esteem and developing, healthy relationship habits. By understanding both the biochemical and emotional attachments of trauma bonds that form in narcissistic relationships, we equipped ourselves with the knowledge to escape these toxic loops. We're not just surviving, we're learning how to thrive in a healthier, more fulfilling relationship outside narcissistic influence. So, stick around. We're going to continue to explore, navigate, and heal from these complex dynamics because freedom is about breaking the bonds. It's about building new and healthy connections. So what we're going to do now is we're going to zoom in on the mechanics of the brain, and it's that mushy brainosphere that's kind of stuck in our cranium. This is the thing that makes breaking up with a narcissist feel like a surgical extraction of your heart without amnesia. It can also feel like a do-it-yourself lobotomy where you have to like cut out the wounds from your own brain, because it's more than just melodrama, it's neuroscience. When you decide to cut ties with a narcissist, your brain doesn't feel sad, it feels actual pain. The same neural pathways that light up during physical pain are activated during a breakup with a narcissist, and it magnifies the emotional agony. And the brain circuitry and the breakup pain with a narcissist can feel like a heart attack almost. It's like your brain becomes a puppet with your narcissistic partner holding the strings. They've been pulling these strings through just calculated mix of mistreatment and manipulation, creating a bond that's really tough to break. And when you try to break free, it feels like an internal tug of war where every pull of the rope, scorches your hands. And this pain isn't just emotional response, it's a physical sensation that goes through your entire being, making the idea of recovery from a narcissistic relationship seem like a distant, almost unachievable dream. And let's look at the role of dopamine that's dished out by a narcissist, because narcissists are dealers of both pleasure and pain. The role of dopamine, this is the brain's own brand of illicit drugs. This chemical plays a leading role in the drama of narcissistic relationships. You can kind of think of dopamine as the ultimate pleasure dealer. It's like in the casino of narcissistic love. Every time that you experience a moment of joy, whether it's an unforgettable date or a passionate night, dopamine is there. So make sure you remember that by linking pleasure directly to the person who caused it is what's going to reinforce that. Narcissists, much like gamblers, know exactly how to manipulate your brain chemistry. They don't dish out rewards of affection or attention consistently. They do it sporadically. It's the narcissist way of keeping you on the hook. And one day a narcissist is like the person of your dream, showering you with love and attention. And the next, they're colder than winter in Siberia. It's this intermittent reinforcement that creates a powerful addiction. It's like being a gambler at a slot machine and consistently pulling the lever because you remember that one time that you hit the jackpot and you're hooked on the narcissist, much like a dopamine dealer, always chasing the high of those good times, despite the increasing losses of your emotional and mental health. It's not about the emotional resilience that you needed to create. It's about a biochemical response that has been hijacked by narcissistic manipulative behavior. By recognizing these patterns, you empower yourself to start taking control back, to, recalibrate your brain's reward systems, and the ultimate break free from these toxic loops that have held you captive. And as we delve deeper into these dynamics, remember the path to recovery is about cutting ties with the narcissist. It's more than that. It's about understanding the ties that bind us to on the biochemical level. And I get it. I get it. This is very complex, but let's explore the concept of intermittent reinforcement and its addictive nature, because it's a tactic that narcissists wield, with the precision of a chess master. And this strategy is not just cruel, it's calculated to keep you on the hook and playing on the human brain's, susceptibility to addiction, much like a drug. Think of intermittent reinforcement as a narcissistic lottery where the prize is, sporadic affection. And these intense feelings can create, this euphoric effect on our brains. And it's that potent. And the narcissist may vanish for days, juggle multiple relationships to try to sweep you off your feet, and then suddenly slam on the brakes. And this unpredictability, it doesn't just keep you guessing, it fires up your brain's reward systems, making the narcissist feel irresistible, like you're trapped in an addictive cycle, always chasing the high of rare affection, much like a gambler who just can't leave a slot machine that after paid out big, once they're paid out big. But most of the time, it's just swallowing coins, and it'll happily take back everything that it give plus more. And here's where the plot thickens. Your brain might actually find that, the nice people that are in your life, they're less thrilling. They can even be boring sometimes. Why? Because their kindness is consistent. Unlike bad boys or bad girls, where, they were usually drawn to, it's just like we turn every encounter into a dizzying mix of highs and lows. Nice people don't provide the same dopamine spikes. This creates a sort of, masochistic craving in your brain for those who bring you pain. And after a breakup with a narcissist, if they re-enter your life, the rush is so intense, not because they've changed, but because your dopamine starved brain savors this familiar high. So how do we manage this dopamine addiction? To break free from this cycle, understanding your dopamine responses is crucial. This isn't just about getting over somebody, it's about rewiring your brain's response to narcissistic tactics. Start by seeking relationships that offer, stability and genuine emotional support, not just the roller coaster highs and lows. Recognize the signs of intermittent reinforcement by a narcissist and refuse to play the game. Set strong boundaries and call out manipulative behaviors from the start. Self-care is your best friend. Here in, recovery from narcissism, therapy can be incredibly effective at unpacking these biochemical bonds and help us rebuild our self-esteem. That's the work that I do with my clients. And it's important to do things outside the narcissist that provide healthy and steady release of dopamine, like regular exercise or diving into hobbies that really just light you up. Don't underestimate the power of a support system. Friends, family, and even support groups can provide emotional grounding and validation to needs that you need in your recovery. And sharing your journey with others who have walked down similar paths through narcissism can strengthen your resolve and offer fresh perspectives. You are not alone in this battle against these biochemical bonds. But with the right tools and right support, you can detox from a narcissistic relationship and cultivate connections that are not only healthy but fulfilling. Navigating the chaotic emotional pendulum of relationships with a narcissist can often feel like being, strapped to a swing that's attached to an airplane during an air show. One moment, they're sweeping you off your feet and they're showering you with all this affection, and then next, they're ghosting you for somebody else. And this extreme unpredictability isn't just, emotionally draining, it's neurologically addictive. And, the very unpredictability that makes the narcissist so distressing is what lights up our brain's reward signals. And each time they pull away, it leaves you craving for the good times, magnifying even the smallest gestures of affection. The scarcer the attention the narcissist gives you, the more valuable it seems, making every crumb of kindness feel like a feast. And the relentless cycle of emotional highs and lows is intoxicating as your brain continues to equate these intense turmoil with excitement and pleasure. And, despite the emotional costs on us. So, how do we reset the dopamine and oxytocin bonds and break the biochemical chains from narcissistic relationships? Well, to break free from the narcissistic partner, it's important to resist, these siren songs of dopamine. It's a chemical that turns pain into pleasure and keeps you coming back for more. Each positive experience you shared with a narcissist, each laugh, each tender moment, reinforces that bond, making it tougher to sever ties. Compounding this with the challenge of oxytocin, the so-called, love hormone. This hormone is potent enough to bond mother and child, and also binds you to a narcissistic partner who doesn't deserve your trust or affection. Physical intimacy with a narcissist isn't just a moment of closeness, it's a biochemical glue that fuses them to you, deepening the trust and attachment. even in the face of betrayal. And this is why walking away from toxic narcissistic relationships can feel like tearing yourself apart. And it's like tearing yourself away from them because it's not an emotional decision, it's a physical one. And here's like 5 steps to breaking away from narcissistic bonds that narcissists create in us. One, recognize the triggers. Understand that, what actions and patterns trigger your dopamine oxytocin response. And awareness becomes your first step to changing how you react to that dopamine receptors. And two, create emotional distance. Limit or eliminate interactions that lead to dopamine spikes and oxytocin floods. This might mean cutting off or setting strict boundaries if no contact isn't possible. Number three, seek support, rely on friends, family, or a therapist who can provide a perspective and reinforce, when you're tempted to go back to those emotional patterns. And speak to a therapist that is skilled in interpersonal trauma, because this is a specialty unto itself. And number four, engage in new activities. Replace old habits with new ones that release dopamine, but in a healthy way. And this is such as exercise and hobbies or other things that you just find rewarding and pleasant. Practice mindfulness and self-care. Techniques like meditation and yoga and journaling can help you manage the stress and the emotional blackouts that kind of happen and foster a sense of calm and control. And number six, understanding the science behind your feelings can be dismissed, can demystify a lot of these emotions that are meaning. It brings meaning to these experiences and the impulses that you're experiencing. Making emotional swings makes them easier and easier to manage. Um, and I hope this helps, because understanding the biochemical chains that bind you to a narcissist, to equip yourself with the tools to break them, because it's about reshaping your brain's reward system and redefining what joy actually means to you, and rebuilding a life where your emotional well-being is no longer tethered to somebody who's narcissistic, crazy little whims that they have. Because it's not about breaking free from narcissistic partner, it's about returning to yourself. It's about healing. It's about finding true and healthy connections and enriched you rather than deplete you. And let's go deeper now. To understand the entanglement of narcissists creates in our lives, it's important to understand the hormones that are at play. It's a significant role to, bonding with a narcissist. These chemical reactions not only fuel the flames of attraction, but also reinforce the chains of dependency and the manipulation with a narcissist. Hormones such as estrogen and testosterone have profound effects on how we bond to a narcissist. Estrogen, enhances oxytocin, the bonding hormone, making you feel closer and connected to narcissistic partners, even if they are toxic. And testosterone can dampen these effects. So what we find is different people will respond differently to the same relationship dynamics. Once you're sexually bonded with a narcissist, these bonds extend deeply into a psychological and emotional parts of our brain. The mix of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, which spike during stressful interactions, enhance our bonding, making the relationship hard to break despite the destructive nature. And through our stress response, we can create a state of learned helplessness in toxic narcissistic relationships. Narcissists are masters of triggering intense stress responses. So, what does that do? It spikes your cortisol and adrenaline responses in our brain. But we're bonded to these people. So, rather than prompting a fight or flight response, what ends up happening is these chemicals surge so high that they cause us to freeze. And this is what I mean by a state of learned helplessness. This biochemical state of alarm causes our brains to hyperfocus on the narcissistic partner. So we become acutely aware and sensitive to any stress the narcissist cause. Yet, we feel powerless to stop it. And this stress response also drives us to seek comfort from the very sources that caused us our distress. Narcissists are masters at creating codependency states as well. They're like mad chemists that stir around this combination of hormones that make us reactionary, triggering all our fear-based memories, meaning every memory involving fear, anxiety, or abandonment within a narcissistic partner becomes more vivid and emotionally charged. And then bam, we're bonded to a narcissist biochemically. And since the wiring is there to keep us bonded to these narcissists, there are strategies for breaking free and breaking this wiring. To break free from this addictive cycle of addiction to a narcissistic partner, it's so, so, so important that we recognize and strategically counteract these hormonal and psychological bonds that are created. And here are 6 ways to rewire our brains in a way that can, help us break away from these bonds. One is understand the biochemical bonds. Recognize how oxytocin and cortisol make you feel, and notice when your body's being triggered by it. Because seeing it and noticing that this is biochemistry that is taking place is influencing your feelings and perceptions in the relationship. This is so important. This awareness alone can diminish their control over you. So develop emotional resilience is number 2. Find ways to prevent the creation of new pleasurable memories with a toxic narcissist. This might involve setting strict boundaries or physically distancing yourself from that person. Because the love bombing, resist it. You have to resist it because, if we break down or get sucked in, we reinforce this pleasure response in our brain. Number 3 is create healthy relationships with healthy people. Spend time with people that offer consistent, healthy interactions. These relationships can help stabilize your emotional state and promote a healthier oxytocin response without the roller coaster of stress hormones. And there's no spikes in adrenaline and oxytocin. So these relationships may feel boring at first, but we're thinking boring is good. We have to relearn what human connections are. And number 4, focus on self-care. Spend more time doing things that reduce stress, such as yoga, meditation, or any form of physical exercise. These things lower cortisol and adrenaline levels and help us combat feelings of helplessness. Number 5 is therapeutic interventions. Hire somebody who specializes in trauma and in relationships. Therapy can also offer valuable insights into biochemical and psychological dynamics that you're experiencing and provide coping mechanisms to break free from the grip of toxic partners. Plus, the therapist will help you work through things at your own pace, meaning that the growth that you experience will be long lasting. And number 6, build a healthy support network. Lean on friends, on family, or support groups who understand your situation and can offer emotional support. Join groups of other people who are going through what you've been through. Even join mediated groups to help reconnect with others who actually understand. You don't have to educate on what narcissism is, right? And keep in mind, there is no silver bullet here. It's slow work and it's done over time, but this leads to lasting empowerment, ensures that you move away from toxic entanglements towards a healthier, more fulfilling relationship. Remember, breaking free is not just about ending a relationship, it's about healing from the inside out, rebalancing your hormones and rewiring your emotional responses to reclaim your life. A happier and more fulfilled life that isn't draining your life, your liberty, or your pursuit of happiness. So, to understand all of these things, let's look at how our brains and bodies handle this interplay of fear, anxiety, and addiction to people with narcissistic personalities. Understanding these dynamics is so important. When you're walking on eggshells around a narcissist, worried that the wrong move or the wrong look or the wrong question will trigger them, your body is just flooded with adrenaline. And it's this high state that surrounded you, oddly, makes you act as an antidepressant. Adrenaline and cortisol can act as an antidepressant, and the surge alleviates some of the intermittent stress. It also becomes part of your unconscious body starts to crave. And we crave being in this hyper alert state. And I know it's a chemical addiction to abuse. What else happens is that fear triggers the release of dopamine, forcing the brain to reward circuits to deepen this addiction to these highs. And this is how narcissists, suck us into this cycle where fear and pleasure are intertwined, making it so difficult to break free from irrational behaviors from a narcissist and detach ourselves from toxic relationships. These intense narcissistic experiences are like riding a roller coaster or facing life-threatening situations. They they can be strengthened further when narcissistic, turning bonds into deep connections, often felt with somebody who's continually inflicting emotional pain on us. Our brain tries to soothe us, with survival responses, or at least the brains are tricked into doing so by the very same people who are narcissistically manipulating our minds. Now, let's talk about serotonin and obsessive love. What is this? It's a biochemical roller coaster of emotion. And here's the thing: it's like falling in love with a narcissist. And its effect on our brain chemistry is important to understand. So hear me out on this. It's like we fall in love with a narcissist. What ends up happening is there's a drop in serotonin levels, and something that also happens, that is the very same thing that happens in the obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD. Serotonin levels drop, and when serotonin level decreases, it disrupts our ability for mood regulations and decision making, leading to obsessive thoughts, primarily centered around the narcissist. It's like we can't get them out of our minds. And the state encourages, sexual behavior, desire, fantasy, that those bonds, through oxytocin and dopamine are strengthened further. It also makes every single interaction with a narcissist overly intense. Now, get this. Just thinking about any pleasurable moment with a narcissist can trigger a dopamine release, intensifying the reward circuits in the brain. And this can make these experiences even more intense with a narcissist, and can even give us a dopamine high. In this biochemical drugstore that's behind why victims of narcissistic abuse find themselves, hanging on to every single message, or eagerly anticipating calls, and endlessly fantasize about, the next encounter, despite the fact that this person is sick to the head and they're just not good for us, like not even a little bit. The narcissists exploit these biochemical mechanisms through unpredictable behavior and intermittent affection. So, love bombing, which creates almost an irrational compulsion to return to them, despite the emotional turmoil that they cause. It's weird, right? It's like, crack cocaine. It's so bad for us, most of the time, but those little highs and lows now and again, it's just like those are the ones that feel so good. So we know there is a chemical addiction that happens when we're with a narcissist, and there are ways that we can break free from this deep chemical bond that forms in our brain. And I'm going to take you through five of them. One is awareness and education, because it's not you, it's your brain chemistry. So learn as much as you can about the biochemical and psychological bonds that are at play here. So you're less likely to go into that cycle again, or at the very least, exit much, much sooner. Because learning can provide you with an objective perspective and your feelings and your behaviors, helping to break the the primordial hold that these toxic partners have over you. And two, professional help, engaging with a therapist who specializes in addiction and trauma or relationships can be very valuable. There are so many different modalities that can help. It's like I use with my clients, it's like IFS or parts work, helps you become more of an inner guide to your own impulses. Therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT can help, address obsessive compulsive tendencies that are related to behavioral thoughts and patterns. Somatic work gets us out of our minds and into our bodies. And hypnotherapy is something else that I use with my clients, can induce a deep state of calm where we can actually go into the trauma work and recovery. Three, managing our chemistry better. Activities that naturally balance serotonin and reduce adrenaline, such as regular exercise, sunshine exposure, and a balanced diet rich in omega-3 fatty acids and lean proteins. Can improve overall mood and regulate and resistance. Also, water. Drink lots of water. Like flush out as much of the adrenaline and the cortisol as you can. Plus, being hydrated prevents us from being easily triggered, since our bodies, when we're thirsty, our bodies are more sensitive to survival strategies. And number four, strengthen emotional connections. Develop and nurture relationships with friends and family and community that are supportive and stabilizing. Engage in hobbies and interests that will fulfill you in just more than just any romantic relationship. In recovery, I have groups where we people meet with like-minded people meet regularly once a week to connect and heal and learn together. Five is mindfulness and meditation. These are practices that can help manage stress, reduce the impact of adrenaline and cortisol, improve overall emotional balance, helping break free from the cycle of dependency and toxic relationship dynamics. And, meditation is also can rewire our brain. It's true, you know, and by, taking these steps, you can begin to unravel the complex web of biochemical and emotional ties that bind you to a narcissist and get your life back on track. These tips can also pave the way forward towards recovery and a healthier relationship. Because our brains are remarkable for their ability to adapt and change. Our brains actually hold the key to healing the damages caused by narcissistic relationships. We can heal. It just takes time. And I didn't meet a single person who couldn't learn to heal themselves. And through the process of neuroplasticity, we can rewire our brain to favor positive, healthy connections over those that can harm us. That's why, regular exercise, strong social bonds, and for people, some people, it's like music or pursuing hobbies and following our passions that create, these neural pathways that support us in our recovery. And overcoming the addiction to narcissists means replacing these unhealthy fixations with actions and relationships that are meaningful and nurturing. Finding things in our lives that enrich our lives. And for some, we may have to go cold turkey or gradually reduce our exposure to the narcissist. When you understand the biochemistry that's at play in these toxic relationships, you can see it as, you're weaning off a potent drug. So managing fear and anxiety is so important in breaking the hold of fear-based attachments to narcissistic people. And recognizing the role of adrenaline and dopamine is creating these bonds allows us to develop strategies to ease their impact on our lives. And mindfulness practices can regulate mood swings and reduce our brain's propensity for obsessive thinking. Setting clear boundaries and incrementally decreasing contact with a narcissist are all forms of practical steps towards emotional independence and self-regulation. And it's important to get support from friends and family or support groups to reinforce healthy relational patterns. Investing time and energy into healthy relationships to provide consistent emotional support and engaging in interests that promote long-term life satisfaction are so important in the healing process. And throughout this video, we've explored toxic trauma bonds with narcissistic and emotionally unavailable people. We've uncovered several critical insights, and I'm going to give you 6 here. Right? One is it's a biochemical addiction. Right? Our brains can become rewired to obsess over partners who cause suffering and hurt to our overall well-being. And remember, narcissists trigger dopamine and oxytocin in our brains, and that's where these bonds can link deeper and reward to the centers of our brain. Number 2, the addiction to the emotional roller coaster. It's the highs and lows and the intermittent reinforcement. This is how these intense experiences strengthen our addiction to the narcissist. And 3, extreme stress to the point of learned helplessness. The role of the stress hormone like cortisol and adrenaline they contribute to the freeze response or state of learned helplessness and make it very challenging to escape the narcissistic abuse. It makes that even more difficult. And number 3, number 4, understanding the hormonal brain chemistry. We know that hormones, in fact, impact our attachments and how we make it more difficult to break away because these powerful biochemical forces keep looping us back in. And number 5, strategies for breaking free. It's also important important to recognize destructive patterns and get professional help, because our brains can rewire themselves because they're neuroplasticity. And, we can forge healthier mental pathways and find support and self care. Building supportive networks, establishing clear boundaries, and engaging in self care are mandatory for recovery and long-term well-being. So remember, you're not alone in this journey. Countless of narcissism survivors have navigated through this challenging path before you and have emerged stronger and more fulfilled. With time, patience, and the right support, you can move beyond the biochemical attachments that we have to narcissistic people and move past your old patterns and just embrace a future that's rich with love and respect. Remember, you are worthy, you are enough, and you deserve all the good things that life has to offer. I'm Miles, I'm from Recovery. Thank you for being part of this community. It's so important that you're here, and I would like to help if I can. If you're in a hurry and you want to get through this recovery process, in months instead of years, send me an email to recovery@narcovery.com. I can get you into my calendar and we can work through this one-on-one. You can also join my group practice where we meet every Wednesday and connect with each other. Or you can message me on Facebook or email for online self-directed courses, which are very affordable. And you can find those on recovery.com/manipulation. If anyone has any questions, be happy to answer them. If not, we'll chat soon. All right. Well, I'm going to end this live stream, and we'll see you guys in a bit.